Modern society tells young people two things at the same time. You're not ready yet, and you're entirely responsible for the outcome. You're told you're still figuring things out, yet you're punished when you don't have things figured out. Nowadays, we extend adolescence indefinitely, so we have to live in a permanent liminality, an in-between. And this creates a lack of confidence, a lack of clarity and direction, and of course a lot of confusion and doubt. Am I enough? Do I really know how to do this? Should I really be doing this, or is it too early for me? Ancient rites of passage and coming-of-age rituals existed to prevent exactly this. So stick around, because now we're going to learn how to restore our crucial and vital rites of passage. In modern life and society, adulthood is blurry. There's a feeling a lot of people carry, but rarely talk about. It's the feeling of being grown, at least your age shows that you've gotten older, but not quite knowing if you've ever actually arrived. Of wondering quietly, sometimes painfully, things like, did I make it? Can I really do this now? Is this good enough? And no one ever told you, now you belong among the adults. You're knowledgeable and skilled enough to take on life now. You're trusted, you are accountable. There was no moment, no threshold, no recognition. So people drift, and when you struggle, when you drift, when you hesitate, it's framed as only your fault. And the door swings in both directions. In some cases, people may feel adult, but aren't recognized as such. They're given adult responsibilities without adult authority, adult expectations without adult trust. They are treated inconsistently. One moment told to grow up, in the next talked down to or excluded, and then expected to be self-sufficient, but denied full legitimacy. You're treated as not yet adult and judged as if you were fully adult. But in most cases, it's the other way around. People who are adult on paper, but nowhere near being mature, competent, prepared, etc. enough to take on life. A world full of Peter Pans and lost boys. Nowadays, many of us in the Western world live in a permanent liminality, an in-between, a state meant to be temporary, now made endless. In traditional societies, liminality was tightly bounded and dangerous. It required ritual containment. In modern ones, it becomes a long-term condition with no clear exit. And liminality without resolution is exhausting. People internalize uncertainty as inadequacy. They mistake a lack of recognition for lack of worth. They're asked to perform adulthood without ever being initiated into it. Ancient societies understood that this was unjust. They knew that expecting maturity without the right education and initiation was like expecting fluency without language exposure. You don't shame someone for not speaking a language they were never taught. Yet modern culture does this constantly. We tell people that to take responsibility, be confident, act like an adult. But responsibility for what, exactly? Confidence grounded in which role? Adult according to whose recognition? When there is no moment of instruction, no clear passage, no public confirmation. People are set up to fail and then judged for failing. Young people are still expected to be adults, but no one tells them what that actually means, how they're supposed to get there, if and when it has happened, etc. And when the structure disappears, the blame doesn't. It simply moves inward. You're in a sense punished for not knowing what no one ever taught you. So if you've ever felt like you missed something, like everyone else got a manual you never received, ancient Indo-European cultures wouldn't have blamed you. They would have said a threshold was never built, and no one should be expected to cross what doesn't exist. Guidance was incomplete, they would have said, and the transition wasn't properly marked. There was no rite of passage. So, what is a rite of passage? Well, as the name suggests, it's a social ritual that manages and marks a transition from one recognized state of life to another. To our ancestors, liminal states and such transitions were inherently unstable and dangerous. So they created formal rites to guide individuals safely across them. And note that I said that it both manages and marks a transition. It's not enough to just get a paper with your age on. You have to be made competent and ready enough to cross the threshold. The coming of age rite of passage among Indo-European peoples was not treated as a test you were supposed to magically pass on your own. Ancient Indo-Europeans didn't assume people would just figure things out alone. They knew better. It was a collective responsibility. Elders instructed, the community prepared. The ritual itself created the conditions for success. And the rite made adulthood unmistakable. It said, you've now been taught, you've been tested, you've crossed the line, and now we will treat you accordingly. So the rite doesn't merely symbolize change, it creates it, making the new identity socially real and binding for both the individual and the community. So a coming of age rite of passage is crucial because it tells the initiate who they are now. It links new privileges to new obligations. It makes the change official and undeniable. It tells both the individual and the community that a real transformation has occurred. And it tells the community how to treat them. And it prevents confusion about authority, responsibility, and expectations, etc. And we really, really need this today. But the human nervous system and psyche still waits for recognition. When societies fail to provide that, people don't stop needing it. And we will reintroduce coming of age, rituals, and other kinds of rites of passage. This video will guide you to the elements and steps to create these absolutely necessary initiations. And on the Harmenia platform, there will be rites of passage for all life stages. Before we get into the instruction part, I'll first address why traditional rites of passage disappeared and why that aligns perfectly with how unnatural and unsustainable modern life is. Rites of passage in the Western world definitely didn't disappear because humans outgrew them, but because the social conditions that once supported them were dismantled. First of all, the Industrialization. Traditional rites depended on clear shared life stages: child, initiate, adult, elder, etc. Industrialization blurred these boundaries. Work moved out of the household and into markets. Education replaced apprenticeship. Adulthood became tied to income, credentials, or consumption rather than status. And as a result, there was no longer a single obvious moment when one became an adult, only a gradual, uneven process, in the best case scenario. Bureaucratic systems replaced ritual authority. Instead of elders or communities recognizing transitions, we now rely on legal ages, certificates, degrees, licenses, etc. These regulate behavior, but they don't transform identity. They might grant permissions, but not belonging. Bureaucracy manages populations efficiently, but it doesn't initiate people. Next, radical individualism privatized transition. Modern Western culture treats identity as self-created rather than socially conferred. Coming of age became something you are supposed to figure out on your own, feel internally, prove through personal success. And this undermines the idea that a community has responsibility for marking and recognizing transformation. And modern societies didn't simply abandon rites of passage, they rejected the conditions that make initiation possible. True initiation requires things that make modern cultures deeply uncomfortable, like clear authority held by elders, unequal roles between initiators and initiates, periods of hardship, discipline or ordeal, temporary suspension of normal freedoms, the power to say unequivocally, you're not yet what you will become. In traditional societies, these were not seen as oppressive. They were seen as necessary because transformation is not gentle, symmetrical, or self-directed. Someone must already stand on the other side to guide you across. And modern Western culture, by contrast, prizes equality at all times and cost, continuous comfort, choice without obligation, identity as self-declared rather than conferred, and the result is a refusal of initiation without a refusal of its outcomes. So instead of transforming young people into adults, modern societies stretch adolescence indefinitely. Another reason rites of passage collapsed is simpler and more painful than we like to admit. The people who used to teach and initiate us aren't there anymore. In traditional societies, parents were, and aunts and uncles, etc., were physically present in daily life. Work happened near home. Skills, values, and boundaries were taught by observation, correction, and example. And just as importantly, there were adults who could say, this is right, this is wrong, you're not ready yet, now you are. Modern life broke that continuity. Parents aren't absent necessarily because they don't care, but because survival now requires them to be elsewhere. Work is distant, time is fragmented, energy is depleted. The community that once shared the burden of initiation has been replaced by institutions that manage schedules, not meaning. So Many young people grow up without anyone consistently watching closely enough to say when they've crossed the line, when they've done something well, or when they're ready to move forward. And this creates a cruel situation. You're expected to know what's right and wrong, but no one is there to teach you in context. You're expected to mature, but no one is there to witness the maturation. And next we have the secularization. That itself definitely doesn't have to be something negative. I myself have grown up in Scandinavia, but rites of passage were embedded in religious or cosmological frameworks. As Western societies secularized, rituals came to be seen as superstitious, arbitrary, symbolic but not real. Once rituals were reduced to just symbols, they also lost their power to actually confer status. And nothing really fully replaced them. Risk-averse societies also fear initiation. Modern societies are deeply uncomfortable with ordeals, authority, asymmetry between elders and youth, temporarily suspending normal rules, etc. But initiation requires these things. So instead of transforming young people, modern societies extend adolescence indefinitely while still demanding adult performance. Western societies removed the structures that once produced adulthood, while keeping the expectation that individuals would somehow arrive there anyway. Rites of passage didn't vanish because they were unnecessary. They vanished because modern systems fragmented community, desacralized transition, and shifted responsibility onto the individual, leaving a structural void where initiation once stood. So what did ancient Indo-European rites of passage actually do? And what do we do to recreate and reinstitute them, to give future generations a healthier life and better opportunities and conditions to thrive? What would a real rite of passage look like now? Across Indo-European cultures, Greek, Roman, Celtic, Germanic, Indo-Iranian, Slavic, etc., we see remarkably similar coming of age structures. Not identical rituals, but the same functions. After their upbringing and education, young people were separated from childhood, leaving behind the household, old clothes, old names, even the deities of the home and hearth. They were tested and transformed through ordeals, training, instruction, and symbolic death. And then they were publicly reintegrated as adults. And this last part is crucial. And these rites didn't just change how the individual felt. They changed how the entire community viewed and treated them. After the rite, you could marry, bear arms, have full rights, be held fully responsible, have a say in assemblies, etc. Many things. The ritual said, clearly and publicly, a real transformation hath occurred. There is no ambiguity, no almost, no maybe someday. You were now accepted and, so to say, bore the mark. You were inside the circle of trust. So the rite existed to end the child identity, leave the child and childhood behind, and rebirth the adult identity and publicly and ritually force that transformation. I will now give you a well-attested and hands-on framework for how to recreate Indo-European pagan coming-of-age rites. One of the most important things you can do for your family and kin. Every rite of passage follows a common structure, divided into 3 parts or stages. The first one is separation from the old status. Then comes a liminal or transitional phase in which normal rules are suspended and transformation occurs. And then we have the incorporation into a new status that is publicly recognized. So virtually all Indo-European coming-of-age rites follow the same tripartite structure: separation, liminality, reincorporation. So the separation phase is a symbolic death. Adulthood requires a definite end of the child self. This is not metaphorical, it's ritualized to imprint psychologically. The initiate is removed from family, hearth and home, deities and spirits associated with home and childhood, from the mother, childhood environment and ordinary social rules. And this can, for example, involve a physical removal from the ordinary, bringing them out somewhere, a ritual death symbolism, a name stripping, a shaving, cutting the hair or marking. The initiate has to be taken away from what he or she knows, what's familiar. He or she is now leaving this behind. And now starts the liminal phase, the threshold. The initiate is expelled, outcast and ostracized from the community. This is the most important phase. The initiate has to experience loneliness, distance, and that one has to be able to fend for yourself. He or she is right now nothing, an in-between. He or she is pure potential and has to become something and someone. And this unknown, this inner and external wilderness, is where order dissolves and identity can be remade. So this phase should include loneliness, isolation, fear, hunger and fasting, physical hardships, cold, pain, sleep deprivation, etc. You can of course interpret this however you want. To our ancestors, liminality was always considered dangerous, and the point here was that the initiate is supposed to become dangerous, untamed and outside normal morality. Simply because to create order and beauty in the future, one has to have these capacities and characteristics within oneself. One has to bring out one's strongest and most important instincts to later be able to provide, serve and protect. And therefore initiates were often masked, painted, identified with animals like wolves, dogs and bears. Remember, for example, that berserker means bear shirt, ulfhednar means wolf coat or wolf skin, the Latin luperci means wolfmen, etc. This phase can last for days, weeks, months or even years. That was common, depending on what you feel is needed. In this liminality, there should also be, of course, instruction, teaching and mentoring. Back in the day, it was survival skills, ancestral stories and genealogy, myths, laws, taboos, ritual duties, etc. And I personally think we should definitely also teach financial literacy, how to find purpose, etc. And then we come to the last stage, the reincorporation, the homecoming and the return home as someone new, something more. In book and film theory, this is often called the return with the elixir. In the hero's journey, it's the return with the elixir. The protagonist returns and brings back wisdom, treasure and healing from their adventure to benefit the community. He or she has transformed both themselves and their ordinary world by sharing their newfound understanding or power. Like Luke Skywalker returning with Force connection, Harry Potter knowing magic, Frodo's deep understanding of evil, and Neo's awakened consciousness, all enriching their communities and or themselves. And this stage has to include a very clear and special acknowledgement and recognition, something that forever will show that the person has now taken that step. Most often there were, of course, feasts. This public recognition is, of course, extremely important, but it's important also that there's more than that. The person might be accepted into a new context, a community or circle, new doors opening. He or she might receive some kind of token of their development and achievement. Sometimes they got a new name, perhaps a special gift, etc. It has to be a strong and unforgettable symbol. So again, a separation and death, a liminal phase or the threshold, and then a clear and remembered reincorporation. On the platform, we go much more in depth about these groups of youth outcasts, these war bands, the specific markers, gifts and clothings, about name takings, etc. But the structure I've just given you is definitely enough to start creating new rites of passage. Do your family and friends a favor and give them real rites of passage. That will change their lives. And always remember, a rite of passage is so much more than just now you went through these weeks of testing. For them to pass the tests, they must have been instructed, taught and mentored throughout their upbringing. And more about incorporating children in our customs and traditions too on the Harmenia platform.